Hey there, I'm Chris McDonald, and I appreciate you guys joining us for the Race Day Essentials for Hybrid Event Sessions. So one thing before we get started, all of you guys are going to be muted throughout the session. However, there is a chat button, and it's on my other screen, so I might have a little bit of trouble seeing it, but I do have a number of other RunSignup folks on with me to help answer those questions. So if they see the same question coming up over and over, we'll pause and talk about it. And if you have any specific questions that you don't want to post outright, you can always message someone who has RunSignup beside their name. I think we have both Shelly and Johanna in helping out. And like I just told Steve, the session is being recorded, and we're going to share this session publicly. So if you don't want your video on the recording, we totally understand. So if you don't want your video on the recording, then make sure you just turn your webcam off. So that being said, I have a lot of slides. We're going to breeze through some of them with the idea that this is being recorded so you can go back and pause and read through what you need. We're not going to do a deep dive on how to set anything up specifically. So just keep that in mind. If there is something that you need a deeper dive onto, we do have lots of other training material, and you can also always reach out to me, crisp@runsignup.com, and I'd be happy to chat with you about whatever you have going on. So with that being said, we're going to get into Race Day Essentials for hybrid events. And so we're going to go through the hybrid approach. I think you guys have probably talked about this all day at this point, but then we're going to go into pre-race planning, during the race, post-race, and then utilizing your timers as a resource. So why hybrid racing? I think, again, at this point, this is an obvious thing. Some things to consider, though, is the beginning of next year is going to continue to be challenging in our industry. And so by offering the hybrid event where you have virtual, challenge, and in-person, if you're able to hold in-person events, it does make your event a bit more, I dare say, cancellation proof, but it gives options that you can still deliver on the event. So, and if those of you that are joining for the first time, the hybrid approach is having both on-site, virtual, and or challenge options so that people don't just have one option to go to. So we're going to go straight into pre-race. So with the pre-race, we are going to be talking about the hybrid race options, timing and results, bibs, and having a socially safe environment. So this is basically well, we'll get into that in a second. Sorry. So with the planning, you need to decide which options are best for your race. And again, the flexible options are essential for 2021. Hopefully by the end of the year, things will be a little bit better, but for the initial stages, you do want to be as flexible as possible. And so that means having a lot of different, you basically need to over communicate. You need to have as many different pieces, and I actually do have a couple of notes on this checklist on the last one. So I apologize, I'm not that used to Zoom. I'm used to doing GoToMeeting. So you do need to determine your race structure as to whether or not you're going to be having extended dates, having multiple race options and courses, and then obviously adding that virtual race. With the timing side, you're going to be deciding if you're using RFID, UHF, if you're going to be using any kind of GPS tracking option, manual result submission, or any combination of those. With the bibs, you will need to, you're going to be utilizing bib management in a more than likely a dynamic bib assignment, or some sort of new bib assignment. If you've been pre-assigning your bibs and shutting off registration, that's likely going to be changing. only because registration is going to be open longer. You might have people on course while people are still registering. And so dynamic bib assignment comes into play for the in-person events. And then also with your virtual options, you have the digital bib, which Matt Sinclair talked about in the last talk. And then with packet pickup, you need to obviously come up with a socially safe and responsible approach. And we'll talk briefly about how to use the check-in app to make that happen. So with the timing side, sorry, this is lagging on my end. With the timing side, like we talked about, you have obviously your normal timing, which is slinging mats on the ground. And I joke about slinging, obviously, putting out mats at a normal start finish line, but also utilizing things like tools like RaceJoy for self-submission that are auto-submitted, while also having the manual function for those that don't want to run with their phone or have issues with, a lot of people don't update their firmware on their phone, and so they're still stuck back in like 2010 or something like that. And so, it can be challenging when you're working with other people's technology. So just having that backup, and we'll go into redundancy later, but just making sure that you have plenty of ways to take in this data and options so that everyone feels like they can participate and have value in the race experience. There's also the idea of remote timing. So for those of you that are race directors, don't panic if your timer brings this up. For those of you that are timers, consider this as a safe alternative. And that is, many timers have been remote timing, whether it be 10 miles or 10 feet, where they're not physically plugged into the decoders at the finish line. And so that might be alarming to some people, but I would say the majority of timers at this point have 3G or 4G LTE cards in their decoders and can remotely connect. So it is a safe option in terms of timing the event and allowing to be further away from the finish line, so less contact in that regard. So there's plenty of other ways in terms of planning the results. So you need to figure out how you're going to be doing the on-site scored results, and also the RaceJoy auto submission, and then the virtual user submitted results. Keep in mind that you likely want different result sets for different course that you're going to be using. So if you have an in-person timed course, you'll have a result set for that, for say your 5K. If you have a on-course virtual, you might have a result set for that, and then you might have a race anywhere option, a result set for that. So just clearly defining that for the athletes, so they know where their results are going, and they know that if they ran with RaceJoy but didn't show up to the real event, they can find their results. So digital bibs, just an idea here, and again, I know that that Matt talked about digital bibs in the last like a how-to setup. But I did want to point out that, I mean, I've done a number of hybrid events over the last 4 months, and you'd be surprised at the number of people that actually do print out, the virtual runners that will print out their digital bib and run with it and send pictures and things like that. So don't skimp on that setup. And you can really do a lot with it. I mean, if you're not that technically inclined, feel free to just use our normal, like, simple design features. But if you have the ability to design out PNG files, I mean, you can see in this image, the one on the left, that's the back end where you have the different boxes with my name, and the 1, 2, 3 is where my bib number will drop in. And then the image to the right is where the actual bib on RunSignup is. So you can see there that they were able to add a sponsor in, and a super fun, just a super fun bib for people to wear. So moving on to the next bit, in terms of staff management and safety, we focus a lot on the athlete. And before we go into the race, which is basically only focused on the athlete, I just wanted to take a moment and just remind timers and race directors that staff management and safety is also a big thing to consider. So just having a staff management and safety plan, I think, is something that is important. A lot of the athletes, once they start racing on site, might not be wearing masks. And so just making sure you're taking those precautions to limit staff exposure and your own exposure. Suggestions like getting there early, and I know it's not exciting to hear, I need to wake up earlier, but there's just going to be some baby steps to getting back into the racing experience. And so showing up to the race site earlier while nobody's there and getting set up if possible, tearing down after while nobody's there, again, just limiting the number of people that are around while you're out working. And then wiping down all touch points if there are any, with approved disinfectants. I just put approved disinfectants to just be super general. I'm not going to tell you what to use. Check with the CDC or health department. I think by now you probably have some stuff at your house that is great at cleaning things. And then also having backup PPE for your staff. And then also in this planning stage, consider providing no-touch services and limiting exposure. So what I mean by that is removing touch points in advance. So dynamically assigning bibs with the check-in app with QR codes and asking the athlete to come to packet pickup with their QR code printed out, so you can use something to scan that QR code, scan the bib, slide it over. It's going to make things super efficient and touchless, but also at the finish line, just making sure. We've had inquiries recently about kiosks and printouts and things like that. And at this point, it's just, I would strongly advise against those things. You're working so hard to get approval, and we'll go into starting procedures and things like that. Then turning around and having gathering points at the finish line is just completely shooting yourself in the foot. So just consider that in the planning so that you can effectively deliver on race day and have a safe experience from start to finish. And other things like having self-managed water foot pedals. I've got a picture of that I saw when I was at an event. I thought it was an amazing concept where you don't have to touch anything, quite literally step on a pedal and water comes out of the cooler. And then obviously, if you're not on site offering, or if you are on site offering Race Joy's GPS timing, you can communicate remotely, and also you can track people where they are. And then, like we just talked about, timers are able to do remote timing. So we planned appropriately. So let's get into the actual race itself. Every time I double click, it stops. So for race day, we're going to be talking about packet pickup, the new start line, defined courses, and Race Joy. So with packet pickup, I felt like this was an appropriate picture to see all the disinfecting solutions on both sides of that plexiglass, and still using mask coverings, and also using something that can scan that can scan things so that they don't have to touch. Some of you might think this is overkill. I think this is like dead nuts on. So and again, I think a little bit of investment in advance will go a long way. So again, with the packet pickup side, you're really wanting to make sure that there are as few touch points as possible. So with that being said, plan for social distancing, spread out the stations if possible. So whereas you normally might use like a tent and use 2 lines on each side of a tent, so you have 8 lines total, try to get a hold of a couple more tents, spread things out, put dots on the ground, have a plan to manage or limit crowds and enforce that social distancing. At this point, once you start putting out signs and dots on the ground, people are used to this. They're going to Home Depots and Lowe's and the grocery store. They're seeing these X's or dots on the ground. It's not surprising to them when they're asked to spread out. And so you can also use cones, flags, dots, whatever you want to, whatever you have at your disposal. You can always mail out packets. Obviously, you need to keep in mind the extra costs that are going to be incurred there. it does decrease, or sorry, it increases your lead time. It decreases the amount of time you have pre-ordering, and you have to consider the bibs that are lost in the mail. What I've told people is, if you're just mailing out the bib, a number of folks have just mailed out the bib, and then the finishers get the t-shirts, and so they're using the check-in app at the finish line to check people in, so that people aren't walking around after packet pickup with their shirt and having to stash it somewhere. I felt like that was a great use of the check-in app. And speaking of using the check-in app for efficiency, obviously, like we talked about, the scanning and the QR and barcodes. If you're getting custom bibs done, you can always go chat with your bib manufacturer. If you're not getting custom bibs done and you're buying stock bibs, still talk to them. Almost every single bib production company, they have the ability, or they have stock bibs with either QR or barcodes. So, and then, like we said, consider providing the shirt giveaway at the end of the race. And so, for those of you that don't know, I steal pictures off of Timers Talk and Race Directors Hub and things like that. And a lot of you guys share pictures with me. And so, if you ever want pictures of your event to show up in a talk, feel free to email them to me. I integrate them in as much as possible. So I did want to share some of you guys have seen these images. So again, it's just different ways of doing packet pickup, whether it be inside or outside, having plexiglass, having cones, having ways to get athletes through, again, creating a safe way to get the athlete through that packet pickup process, where they can clearly understand what to do. And so this was actually from the Richmond Marathon. They had huge masks required signs. And the top right is an overhead view of what all was going on. And so you can see there, the tent on the left is the image down below it. So they had one station per, and like 12 feet apart for their stations. And then the athletes got their bib and walked straight up to the start finish. So it was a great use of space. I realize not all of us have the kind of space that they did at that event, but scout everything out and see where you can set things up, just to keep people from gathering and to keep people away from the start line and away from each other if possible. So now we're going to go into the actual start lines themselves for defined courses. Obviously, Race Anywhere is undefined. They can literally race anywhere. So there's no need to go into further discussion about Race Anywhere. So for defined courses, there's a lot of different options out there. So you're going to be looking at a number of different things. One is if you can add multiple courses with the same distances, so they're in different places. Or you can increase the dates to spread people out. You can also have staggered starts, corral times, etc. Or you could have them all start and finish at the same point, but have multiple different ways they can run. So kind of like a daisy, which I've only seen a couple times because you just take up so much footprint for your race. But it is a super neat thing to have people going out and running all these different directions and then coming back to a same point. But with your event start logistics, you're going to be looking at that single day or multi-day, and whether or not you're going to be on closed roads and what time and day they have to be open. And then you're planning at that point for your equipment, power, and staff to man multiple splits out on course. So with the timers, I've been over this before, but I'm going to just very quickly go over some options that you have for starting. So mass start, I'm just going to say right now, don't do it. It's just a bad idea. This is the only thing in red, I think, in the entire talk. Don't do a mass start, hard stop. Limited wave starts is just corrals every X amount of time. There's pros and cons to each of these. You guys can go back and review these. Like I said, we have a lot of content. I want to make sure I get through as much as possible. Time trial. If you've ever watched the beginning of the Tour de France, that's it. Or coming out of the start house. You can do the same thing with runners or pool swim triathlons. Do this. So you also have the ability to do a grid start. This is what I think a lot of, or the majority of races have been doing, and having 6-foot dots, cones, flags, whatever, out at the starting area, and just letting people go out and stand on their cone or dot, and then starting them in waves of, fill in the blank, 20, 30, 50 every X amount of time. Open start finish, there's huge upsides to this because people can go when they feel comfortable. There's downsides as well, and because a lot of people will just start with their friends, and so the optics can look not as great if 25 people show up from a running club and all start together. But if you do some of these together, like having a multi-day event with an open start finish, there's so much time for people to spread out, and it just gives them plenty of time to feel safe and do the right thing. So I did do an overhead video. Fingers crossed that all the videos here work. So light gathering here, not really people anywhere near each other. And there are 2 people that started at the same time. Again, probably a couple more people than should be gathered, but you can see it's very, very spread out. So I've encouraged people to try to find like rails to trails or off course or off road options, golf courses, things like that, if any are closed down in your area. So it's just a great, if you can get off the road, you're going to have a lot more options to do big things. So let's see if I can get to, let's see, I think we have a couple other start line options as well. So again, we've got cones laid out, and you can see the overhead, you can see people stacked up. And granted, some are likely standing too close to each other, but we've done our best to keep them 6 feet apart and 3 on that. And here's another with, I'm sure a lot of you guys are looking to see if you're going to pop up. So I hope I make somebody happy with their event pictures showing up today. So the one on the left actually has a time trial start with a couple people at a time. The one in the middle has, again, people broken out 6 feet apart. And you can see the one on the right, there's yellow dots along the ground. So it's spread out, and that's what's key, is spreading people out. So the new defined course, some things you need to consider here are just basically making sure that you have markings and signage. The biggest thing is that you're not going to have as many volunteers likely on course. And so marking the course and having lots of signage is super important. You can utilize RaceJoy for key directional cues, not so much as every single turn, but maybe turn around ahead. And then on course, having a no-touch approach to both water and food is super helpful. And so here is another video of a course with a split point off to the side. And again, this is just showing that your courses, you don't want loads of people out on the course at one time. If you're using the roads, you need to ensure that your last finishers of your last wave will have enough time prior to the traffic being allowed on course. And then if you are moving off the road or onto a path, and you're going to be starting and finishing outside of sunlit hours, just consider how much light's going to be on the course. A lot of athletes don't feel comfortable running on trails in the dark. And whereas if you had a large event that, parking was a huge issue previously, if you're spreading this out over a longer period of time, you might take some of that pressure off. And so you can utilize courses that you previously couldn't, because maybe you had a 2,000 person event, but you spread it over, 2 or 3 days, and you have, 8 hours a day to do it. You're not expecting 2,000 people to show up, or you can segment out who can show up when. And so your parking needs might only be, 200 spots versus 2,000. So obviously out and back reduces the resources needed, such as equipment and staff. But the loop course does provide a more socially distant race experience. However, don't get me wrong, I completely understand that loop courses on non-roads are hard. I mean, you're looking for that unicorn. So do your best in finding courses, but keep an open mind. The course that you used in 2019 doesn't necessarily have to be used at the beginning of 2021. It can come back in 2022 once, the vaccines are taking off and everything's great and we're back to normal mass participation sports. But until that happens, just considering a different course option could be super helpful. So here's just an image of that foot press deal. I believe this is from Water Monster. And it's not so much a pitch, it's just a really cool idea of being able to step on that red pedal and give water. And not having aid stations like cups, but having refill stations and encouraging people to bring their own water bottles, or just having it self-supported. For those of you that say that's crazy, go talk to an ultra. They'll laugh in your face. They've been self-supported doing, 5-10 miles in between aid stations since the beginning of ultras. And so the idea that, athletes need an aid station every half mile or every mile is ludicrous to those guys. So it is doable. You just need to clearly communicate what you're going to be doing for the athletes. So now we're going to be going into Race Joy, and this is the same person from the previous picture, but you can see the volunteers actually utilizing Race Joy to monitor where people are on course. So the big things with Race Joy is helping to deliver an experience similar to the real race. Having a tangible race experience in a virtual race is super important. For those of you that are thinking, okay, I'm going to put on a virtual event and you're just going to give them a t-shirt or not give them anything, the likelihood that they're going to sign up for your next one, or the likelihood they're going to sign up for someone else's next one decreases. So the quality of experience you give to them not only increases the chance that they're going to register for your next one, it's going to increase the chance they're going to register for any event. So keep that in mind, and it does give you a safe and real-time engagement point with participants, and gives a way for you to push out sponsor information too. And you can also integrate this in with results, and then it gives you an idea of where people are on course, which I believe that remote monitoring and timing tool is invaluable. So some of the key features, like we talked about, the custom content branding, the GPS live phone tracking, progress updates. You can send cheers, and the beauty of the cheers is obviously you can send those remotely, so the athlete doesn't have to be, or the spectator doesn't have to be at the event site. And so you have off-course alerts, which again, if you go back to if you're not having volunteers out there, it can be super helpful if people are in an unfamiliar area. So going again, the send a cheer function, it's a great way of engaging people outside of the race. So having the biggest thing that's missing is the large crowds, right? Well, the reason why people love running races is because their friends or family are on the side of the road cheering them on. So providing an experience like this where the friends and family can still cheer them on, but not be exposed to each other, is a fantastic, responsible way of providing a cheer point for people to cheer folks on, because the training is no different this year from last year. They're still pushing it as hard as they can. So ideally they get, as close to a great race experience as they would have had regardless. And so you also have these geo-based cheers and distance-based cheers. So the way to think about this is you could actually put out, like, if there's a water refill station ahead, or mile 4, sponsored by fill in the blank. You don't want to put full-on advertisements in, but you can acknowledge sponsors, and you can also highlight cool facts along the course. The distance-based cheer, or the geo-based cheers, do this on the course map. So this is for in-person racing or on-course racing. Whereas the distance-based cheers if you're doing a race anywhere, you can plug these in and have like if it's a 5K, you can have, you know, a 2.5K turnaround, and cheer people, you know, halfway there or what have you. So again, as an organizer, you have the ability to customize the content, drop in sponsors. You have audio for the athletes. You have a communication system to get information out to your athletes that are on course. And then for you, you can monitor on the back end. And so that monitoring for remote engagement, if you've never looked at the back end of RaceJoy, you can quite literally see little dots running around on the course, and the spectators can track one person at a time, or you know, and see where their friend or family is. But on the back end, you can see everything, which is super cool. And there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. So there's I mean, creatively, RaceJoy was used to track Santa at an event using open source broadcasting software. And you can actually see this was pushed out to a Facebook Live, and with transitions of, you can do overlays in this broadcasting software. And so here's RaceJoy with snowflakes falling and their logo and some funny little Santa things. You can load in custom transitions, so when you're all done, it can wrap up and say the stream's ending. So again, it's different ways for you guys to engage with athletes. You don't necessarily always have to put on races. You can do other fun stuff with it, and just connect with the community. I'm sure you could track leprechauns and the Easter Bunny and things like that if you really wanted to. So now we finished our race. Now we're going into to post race. So with post-race, we're going to talk about the finish line, results delivery, finish certificates, and awards. And also just to point out, like going back to what we said previously, at the finish line, people aren't going to want to come back if they don't feel like there's value in your event. So consider giving a nicer shirt. Consider giving, you know, cool finisher medals. That's what a lot of athletes are looking for. And there's a lot of different vendors out there that can help you with that. So with the finish line, I poked at the timers to just show them a couple days ago during a webinar, just to show them a picture of what a finish line with no mask look like. So we will get back there, but for right now, that same event, what should every single finish line look like? No crowd. This is the same event. And you can see this is active on the course, and one person is finishing. This is the middle of the event, no spectators, this is the way it should be right now. We want a socially distant approach to racing. And by this event spread things out. And so they didn't have any issues with crowding, things like that. This was for 16 days they put this race on. So with in-person finish line options, you have two main options: separate start finish and a shared start finish. All of this is going to depend on your event size, distance, your staff and volunteers you have available, and the equipment that's available. You do need to consider the crossover congestion of people at the start and finish. And what I tell people is, if you're going to be doing a wave start, you can start doing calculations off of the time in between each wave and the number of people that you have versus the people you have registered. And if you start closing in that gap, you're realizing, okay, we're going to have overlap. We've got to go to a separate start finish. And for longer courses or longer distance races like halves and fulls, it's less of an issue because you have more time before that first finisher. 5Ks and 10Ks, not so much. So if you have a lot of people or you have a shorter event, you're going to be looking at shared start finishes. So again, I would just start doing the math well in advance, plan ahead, and just make sure you're not going to have any of that crossover. I think I am going to sneeze here in a second, so I apologize. So you do have different finish line options. I told you we're going to keep showing pictures of people's finish lines. So again, the common theme that we already talked about is there's no crowds. And some of these races might have had, 50 people. Some of these races might have had a couple thousand. So, I mean, that's a recognizable brand there on the left. If you look around on the fringes, you don't see crowds of people. So again, this is just something to consider. Like, you don't want gathering points. And so with that being said, at in-person timed events, the thing to consider is no kiosks, no printed overall results, except for maybe if you do have an award ceremony, you might have a single printed copy for the race director. Race directors, consider chatting with the timer and saying, hey, can you text or email me a PDF version of it that I can pull up on my iPad at the race? And I'm not saying that every single person is going to be available to do this, but it would solve you handing things back and forth to each other. No scrolling screens. This might seem counterintuitive because nobody's touching a scrolling screen, but the whole point of a scrolling screen is people are congregating. They're coming back and they're going to stand around each other. You at this point, we're at the finish line. You've worked super hard in planning and how people are going to show up and how you're going to start the event and how you're going to mitigate risk out on the course with volunteers and aid stations and things like that. Don't turn around at the finish line and then put up kiosks or receipt printers for people to touch or congregate around. The best option here is going to be texting and emailing results. And again, with results pushed up to our platform, all you have to do is turn on those results or that result notification. And when the result is pushed up live to RunSignup, the athlete, if they accept getting a text or email, they will get a text or email shortly thereafter. So a lot of timers are already doing this. If your timer's not, consider chatting with them about it. It is a service available, and it removes the need for a lot of those touch points. So the other side of things is the virtual experience. And so for those of you that haven't put on a virtual event, you're going to get a lot of questions. How do I submit my virtual results? I'd be willing to say, if I said, hey, push the raise hand button if this has happened to you, nearly all of you would say, yes, it has. And so clearly communicating to these folks, to your athletes, how to submit virtual results and how to use RaceJoy is super important. So the other thing is with some common challenges with those virtual user submitted results is it might require data cleanup. So you can see on this, the first place person obviously didn't run that time. So you can either have things set up so everything has to be approved, or you can set it up so that you have time limits that people have to stay in between. But normally your timer is doing this, and if you're managing all of your virtual results, then you need to. But I would strongly suggest reaching out to your timer and seeing if they can help with this kind of thing, because it's their forte. I liken it to the Matrix, and they can see the Matrix. They can see incongruences in the data, and it's what they're used to looking at. So again, like we talked about, the participants don't always understand the results option or process. So communicating very clearly and pointing them towards that manual result submission page. The other thing is participants don't always know their bib number or are using arbitrary bib numbers. And if you're using RaceJoy, this becomes problematic. And so turning on those bib notification emails and communicating multiple times what those bib numbers are, again, I think is super important. So another thing to consider is setting up your finisher certificates and awards. So I've used these examples a lot, partly because they showcase two great ways of using the finisher certificates. The one on the left, they actually uploaded a custom JPEG file, removed all variable text except for the participant name. They were focused on, in this regard, they were focused on acknowledging that the participant had completed the event rather than their time. It was focused on novice triathletes, and they felt like people would be embarrassed if they weren't as fast as other. So it was a great entry level event for people. And because they did this and didn't showcase everyone's time, a lot of these athletes are keen now to come back because they feel better trained and more empowered to race their other virtual events where there are times. And whereas the one on the right is quite literally a finisher certificate with their time, what their place was in their age group, and what they were overall. So it's your normal information that you would have. And again, you would likely want to schedule an email to go out at the completion of the event with a link. You have a replacement tag link within RunSignup that you can link back to the finisher certificate, and that way you make sure everyone gets their finisher certificate if they want it. And I know people that have printed them out. Again, they put them up. It might not be the person that's running, a 3-hour marathon, but a lot of people are just getting into races. There's a new crowd getting into these virtual races, and this kind of things matter. Finisher certificates, finisher medals, nice swag matter. So some other things to consider, and this is for in-person, and that's limiting the award ceremony or placing all the awards on a table and allowing the athlete to come pick it up. Zoom awards are something very similar, and or mailing out awards. Obviously, with mailing out awards, please keep in mind there is cost associated with that. So I just wanted to just loop back and remind everyone of all of the RunSignup race day products. I know the timers see this nonstop and we talk about it all the time, but some of the race directors don't know what they can and can't do. And so obviously we have everything from registration, you guys are super familiar with that, to bib management where you may have dabbled in, but you can really talk with your timer in regards to the creative ways you can assign bib numbers. And check-in, using the check-in app is a great way to do, again, I know we've talked about it a couple of times, the dynamic check-in. If you don't know how to do that, or you're not as familiar with the check-in app, again, feel free to reach out to me, or check our YouTube channel. We've done multiple webinars on it, but if you're hung up on a specific issue, let us know. We'd be more than happy to go over what you're working through. And then same thing goes for RaceJoy. We've done plenty of webinars on it. If you've not yet used it before, there is an event called RaceJoy Rocks that you can go through, practice with, and get familiar on the athlete side. And then for you race directors, you can find a certified timer that can provide that for you. Scoring, we have both race day scoring and the race director, both of which are incredibly powerful scoring platforms. And then we have obviously a result platform. I think most of you that have put on an event have either seen an in-person or virtual results posted to RunSignup. And then we also have the photos, which has gotten a great facelift with athletes being able to push up photos, and it's also another place, a selling point to post sponsor logo overlays or event logos on your photos automatically. So just keep that in mind. All those products are available and work seamlessly together. And one of the final points is just utilizing your timers as a resource. I know I do a lot of training with timers, and so does the rest of our race day team. Our goal from the race day team is to make sure the timers that you work with are the experts on all things RunSignup, and so that way you can lean on them and work with them to make your race experience better. So, and this could be from registration setup, because hybrid options can get really complex, especially once you start dabbling into the challenges. Same with the results setup and results management. Verifying data and resolving issues are something that these timers have gotten very, very good at. Obviously, they've been timing on site for years, but a lot of people are remote timing. So it's the scored timing, even on those socially distant approaches. It is a step towards the 2019 race experience. And then you can also have them come in and consider doing a start finish with timing equipment and supplement it with race joy. And that way you might be able to provide, additional split data or something like that you weren't normally able to provide. And just to keep in mind, RaceJoy is exclusively available through certified timers. So if you are interested in utilizing it, then you just need to make sure to, if you don't know what a certified timer in your area is, reach out to us. But you can also search for a timer on RunSignup and look for these certified badges that are in place beside that timer. So the take home is really elevating the experience for the athlete. It's to create a successful hybrid race, you have to make it safe and responsible. You've got to emulate a real race setup as much as possible. And that's what people want. They want to cross a finish line. They want to run through an arch or a truss, or they want to feel like they're racing again. And part of all that is utilizing all the tools that you have at your disposal. Because the more value that athlete feels like they have, the more successful your race is going to be, the more likely your athlete is going to come back and race with you again. And hopefully you're growing your listservs for when we can come back and have, 20, 30,000 person events again. So with that being said, that is a wrap. Sorry, I did go 2 minutes long. I have not at all been keeping up with the questions, so we might have had a ton of questions, and I don't.
No, we were actually pretty good.
Ooh, nice. Are there any questions? We covered a lot of stuff really, really quickly. So I'm not sure if there's anything else that people.
Yeah, feel free to type in if you have any, questions, lingering questions. We're happy to answer that.
And I do mean it when I say, if you have specific questions to your event, feel free to reach out. I know a lot of folks do, and I have conversations with both timers and race directors daily. Sometimes they're quick 2 minute, like, try this, and it's an eye-opening, like, oh yeah, I never thought of that, because two heads are better than one. And also I learn a lot from when you guys share your experiences with me, because it's great to have an idea of what's being done out on course.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.